Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about 10 items today. I want to talk about 10 things that I get a kick out of, I chuckle about when I see it. I'll see it here, I've seen it on Twitter, I've seen it all over online, and I always get a kick out of these comments when they come up. And so I thought, hey, why not make a video and we can discuss? So first off, we'll start with the one that always makes me chuckle, which is he's a bust. The earliest I've seen it is on draft day. I have seen on draft day, a team will pick a player, doesn't matter whether it's 1, 10, 15, 20, and somebody will come up in the comments going, well, this guy's going to be a bust. Okay. And it is the weirdest thing to name an 18-year-old as a bust before they, or my favorite too is when after, say, year one in the NHL, they're like, well, this guy's a bust, when clearly that's not the case a few years after, right? It takes hockey players a while. Not every player just comes into the league and clicks. Not everybody's Connor McDavid. Not everybody's Sidney Crosby, very clearly. We have a league that is tough for some guys to transition to. And especially in the case of some players coming from overseas. Maybe they've played on European ice. It's their first time in North American ice. Maybe they don't speak the language very well. And I would imagine for some of these guys who are even, 19, 20, a little bit older, it can be a tough transition to the NHL. And I think that it's taken for granted how tough it can be and how not everybody just jumps in and takes over right away. So the word bust gets thrown around so much, it really doesn't mean anything anymore. Like, it gets used so much for so many players that it's kind of lost all meaning. Bust used to be reserved for guys who were drafted in the top 5. And I don't remember hearing it for guys after their first year. It would take at least 3 or 4 years before we'd start to hear that term getting thrown around. So it is an interesting one to me, and I do kind of get a chuckle out of it when I hear it. And then, of course, at number 2, we've got, and just a blank, got fleeced. And this is immediately after a trade. I've talked about trades, and I've said, it takes a couple of years in most cases to know who really won a trade. And sometimes it's both teams. Sometimes it's neither team. Sometimes neither team ends up winning the trade. But when I see the comment getting made immediately on the day of the trade, it's kind of one of those head scratchers. Now there are some examples of trades that right out of the gate we know that they're head scratchers, and we don't see how one of the teams is going to win that deal. And sometimes we're right, but the so and so got fleeced is every trade, almost every trade. There are exceptions. If it's a 6th round draft pick for somebody, I'm probably not going to hear it's fleeced, but you might then hear, well, that player's overrated. So, right. Number 3, this won't age well. And every single time there's a signing, if it's a long-term contract, if it's beyond 4 years, immediately there'll be the comment of this won't age well. This isn't going to age well. Or the other one that I get a kick out of, which is related to the long-term contract, is when they'll say about a young player, well, he's only had one good year in the NHL. Why are they paying him like that? Because he's a superstar. I heard it about Kaprizov. I heard it about Jason Robertson. Those contracts are aging just fine. And yet this won't age well. This is you can't pay him like that right away. And it's just reality. The economics now of the NHL are such that if a young player comes in and plays extremely well that first year, they're going to get paid. And I understand that the concern might be that player could be Shell Dahlin, but I mean, and you'd have to look that up. But anyways, it is one of those things, and I'm not talking about Rasmus Dahlin, and I'm pretty sure they're not related. But yeah, it is interesting to me how quickly people say, well, that's not going to age well, or how can you pay them this much after one good year? Because you're projecting how they're going to play. One thing that's changed with contracts now is you're paying for what the player will do, and what contracts used to be was you're paying for what they'd already done. So that's where things are different, right? And so that's why these guys get paid really well. And a lot of the contracts do end up aging pretty well. I did the video about a month ago now on 8-year contracts, 7-year contracts, and a lot of them end up aging just fine. And if you need to trade the contract later on, very often you will find a team that will take it on. And then on 4th on the list here is last year was a fluke. And I saw this a lot a week into the season. And we're not quite 2 months into the regular season yet. There's still time for teams to turn it around. And there will be people who take a victory lap with, see, we're a playoff team, or see, no, we're not a playoff team, or however you want to look at it. but we can see it immediately, like a week into the season. See, they're not even making the playoffs this year. What? They've played 3 games out of 82. Let's just pump the brakes a little bit. So and I think on some level it's that it's fans that didn't like the team in the first place. Sometimes it's people that hate watch their own team. There's definitely a group of fans that'll do that. They're waiting for their favorite team to lose to just go, see, there you go. And I don't do that. I do kind of expect losses in big games with Vancouver, but I mean, if you look at their history, that's understandable. But I don't throw out there, well, let's see, that was a fluke. So when they made the playoffs in 2020 and then they got off to a rough start the next season, I didn't, well, see, there you go. At number 5, now, this is used about Arizona all the time right now. Move them to Quebec City. But I can remember when it was said about Carolina. I remember comments about Florida. I still see comments about the Florida Panthers. Move them to Quebec. I remember comments about the New York Islanders. Move them to Quebec. I've seen it directed at New Jersey. Almost any team where attendance might drop, people will be like, see, you need to move that team to Quebec City. I admire people for this dedication to the dream that Quebec City will get a team. The NHL has no appetite to put a team in Quebec City. They may very well have an appetite to put a team in Houston. Doesn't look like it's going to be the Coyotes. So really, I think on some level we get used to movement, and I understand that there are people that are mad that the Quebec Nordiques seem to move without any kind of fight. But at the time, there wasn't much of a fight to keep Quebec in Quebec City. There was more of a fight to keep the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg than there was with Quebec City losing the Nordiques. That was just sort of a, this is happening, and oh, well, it's happening. Winnipeg, they did a lot of grassroots stuff to try to keep the team there. There was a lot less of a fight in Quebec. And I think that's part of the reason that Winnipeg got their team back first. Now, there's still the chance Quebec's going to get a team back, but it's not going to be, Gary Bettman sitting in an office somewhere and going, all right, I've seen 15 comments today about moving a team to Quebec. I guess we have to move a team to Quebec. That's the threshold, past 15 comments in a day. So it's not going to happen, but I don't think people are going to change their desire to see that happen. But I always get a kick out of seeing it because it's like, it's not going to happen. I used to be one that would say that too. I want to say in the early 2000s about the Islanders, but clearly the Islanders have a new building. Things are stable. Arizona is headed towards getting a new building, stabilizing things there. And so, yeah, I don't expect the Quebec comments to go anywhere, but I don't expect that discussion to go anywhere either. I don't think Quebec's going to get a team back. Number 6, there's no hitting. This is also under the headline of back in my day, back in our day. The NHL has changed. The NHL is now a skilled, it is a skill speed league. So if a player isn't fast enough, they're probably not going to make it to the NHL if their skill level isn't high enough. And with the advanced stats and the fact that most teams have now bought into advanced stats, the players that I would say 10 years ago would have been in the NHL, who from an advanced stats perspective were terrible, but NHL teams kept hiring them. It doesn't seem to be the case as much now. Those guys who have the really rough advanced stats and maybe not great defensive numbers, that's changed. One other thing that has changed is every player is expected to play defensive hockey. And so when the players don't, there's far more arguing about it. And yet I understand that those players who don't come back and play defense or don't play defense well, they're kind of the throwback. But the no-hitting argument is one of those oddities because we don't have the same players in the league. There are teams in the league that have guys who can hit. You have the Nashville Predators, a really good example. Flyers went out in the offseason and tried to get more physical. And there are teams that are more physical than others. But in general, hitting, while it may not be as commonplace as it was 20 years ago, there are still some really high-impact hits. There are still guys getting hurt with hits. Players are bigger and faster than they were 20 years ago. So those hits have more impact when they do happen. So maybe there's fewer hits, but maybe they have more impact. But at any rate, it is a regular complaint that I see. I wanted to throw this in here because I don't see I don't see that changing. I don't see the league going back. We're not going to go back to a time when there's the really heavy hitting all the time. We're not going to get back to an era where there's the bench clearing brawls. That's gone out of the game now. Number 7, and this one's kind of related, and I thought, yeah, I'll talk about these back to back. Insert name of player should never play again. I've seen it with Marchand. I've seen it with Tom Wilson. And I'm sure if the internet went back far enough, we'd see it with Chris Simon. We would see it with, I think, Zach Ronaldo. I've seen that comment with at times as well. The reality is that the lifetime ban really isn't a thing in the National Hockey League. There are things that happen in the National Hockey League back in the days before hockey was readily available on TV as it is now. That incidents that if we had, and Eddie Shore comes to mind as an example, but there are players that if those incidents had been on TV, people would have said, wow, they should never play again. And in reality, that's just not going to happen. The NHL is not going to ban. And the funny thing is when I see comments too, like, well, this player, and again, I'll go back to Tom Wilson because I see this. Well, every game he's trying to hurt somebody. Every game he's trying to murder people. I don't see it. And so are there incidents with guys like Marchand and Wilson that make people angry? Yes. Are there incidents involving those players that have made me angry? Absolutely. But a lifetime suspension, it might be a little much. I do think that those players know their role. They play it well. And skirting that line is part of what Marchand's done. I think he's been better at keeping his nose clean over the last couple of years than he was previously. But I understand that reputation follows. The one example I always use is Matt Cook. Matt Cook was rightfully seen as a dirty player for a long time. And even as a Canuck fan, I saw it. I was like, man, Cook is going to really hurt somebody. But he cleaned up his act towards the end of his career. So the last few years he was in the NHL, I actually thought he played pretty clean. But anytime there was an incident that was maybe a little bit borderline and he was involved, he got no slack from fans. And I understood that, and I think he did too. But there was still the comments of, well, he shouldn't even be in the league anymore, and they'd bring up something he did 5 years earlier. So, yeah, it's one of those things, and it'll be interesting to see who takes the place of Tom Wilson and Brad Marchand when the next generation of, not rat players, that seems to be a little oversimplifying of it, but the next generation of players that skirt that line, we'll see who the next one is that people say, oh, no, should never play again, which again seems a little extreme. Number 8, and this is on almost any recap. This is on almost any power rankings. And this is one of the interesting things. There are no bad goaltenders in the National Hockey League. There aren't any. There are good goaltenders. There are great goaltenders. The dividing line between the good and the great goaltenders can change from day to day. Can change from week to week. I did a video not too long ago on the unpredictability of goaltenders. But again, the comments will always be, this goaltender's great or this goaltender's terrible, and it will depend on the day. So right now, there's a lot of praise being heaped upon Samsonov as well as Matt Murray, right? A lot of that, a lot of the praise going on. And yet, a couple months ago, there was a lot of, well, Toronto's not going to make the playoffs because look at that goaltending tandem. That's just terrible. And now the goaltending's pretty good. So it is one of the reasons why I don't weigh in too much when it comes to the goaltending arguments. I've done who I believe are the top 10 goaltenders in the league previous years. I haven't done that in 3 years now. But it is an interesting topic because the best goaltender will change from year to year. And we're seeing that again this year where Shesterkin isn't the same goaltender that he was last year, or the NHL, having looked at footage of last year and the goals that he allowed, you get a book on a guy. You figure out this is where you shoot on him to get the goals. And so it is tough to really declare this is the best goalie in the league because it will change from day to day, from week to week. You look right now, Boston, Ullmark, Swayman, both of them look fantastic, but Ullmark has definitely had downbeats during his career. He's also had some very good runs too, and predicting from one week to the next is difficult. But again, the comments will be there of, this guy's great, this guy's terrible. And it might be the same commenter from one game to the next. So, and I do get a kick out of that. Number 9, and I want to throw this one in, and I wore this reverse retro on purpose because I think this one's okay. I think it's an alright jersey. I think it should have been a third jersey. But when I do videos where I talk about jerseys, or when we get into the discussions, and when I looked at the reverse retro and I looked at the lists people came up with for which jerseys are the best, all of a sudden, all of us are fashion designers. We all have this really good idea of which color palette works for which. And I find it really interesting because I'm like, all of us are suddenly fashion experts because it's a jersey. And I think that we as fans, I get the feeling we put more thought into it than sometimes the teams do. It just feels that way. And again, with this Canes one, it could very well be a situation where they went, well, we'll just say it's 2019 and, just swap some of the colors, put Canes across the front. They'll make it a red one. We'll put the gray storm flags around the bottom. Yeah, that works. And we'll release that'll be our reverse retro. And then immediately the comments are, which ones are great and which ones are bad. One of the things that I've always got a chuckle out of is my favorite jerseys are very often the ones that, I admit they're ugly. And I admit that they're fashion choices that are bizarre, but they stand out. And to me, the ones that stand out, the ones that have a unique look, which can be ugly, are the ones that I'll like. But when I talk about it, people are like, I can't take him seriously anymore with hockey because did you see which jersey he likes? I can't imagine I can't imagine watching a show and going, I really like this guy's opinions, but do you see the pants he's wearing? I can't take him seriously wearing those pants. His opinion means nothing to me now. It's weird. So when I do countdowns of my favorite jerseys and all that, there will always be the, are you crazy? That's not their best jersey. Well, to me it is, and it's an opinion. And it's one of the great things about, with sports. We can all have opinions on who the best is at certain things, and that includes with jerseys. Which teams are the best when it comes to jerseys? And then, of course, there's also clearly you must hate this team because you don't like that jersey. That's not at all accurate. There's jerseys for teams I like that I haven't liked. It doesn't mean I like the team less. Although I would get a kick out of that. Well, I used to be a fan of the Boston Bruins, but then they came out with that Winter Classic with the Barons. I couldn't cheer for them anymore. I was like, I can't feel good about myself when they're going to be wearing that. So I decided I was no longer a Bruins fan. It is a stance I haven't heard yet. But hey, there's probably somebody somewhere on the internet that'll say, well, I became less of a fan when they came out with that jersey. Because as fashion experts, we all have this really good idea of what works and what doesn't. And I wanted to close out with this one because this one always makes me laugh. So you'll have a team that's at the bottom. So like Vancouver, for instance, right? Around the bottom of the West, they win 3 in a row. And immediately I'm saying, plan the parade. The Leafs, playing well. Plan the parade. Plan the parade. Nobody's planning a parade. No one is planning. Nobody anywhere is calling City Hall and going, man, we got to get a parade going. So we're Canuck fans. We've got a 3-game winning streak. Can we have a parade for that? No, you can't have a parade for a 3-game winning streak. Stop calling City Hall. So the plan the parade is one of my favorite comments because no one's planning it. Believe me, there are no Toronto Maple Leafs fans right now planning a parade. As Toronto Maple Leaf fans, I think it's very similar to what we have with Vancouver. We would like to have a parade. It'd be great to have a parade for winning a championship, but we plan on heartache. We make sure that we're in a good place that when that heartache arrives, we're okay with it. But parade, we if you're Toronto, getting out of the first round, getting out of the second round, having a Final Four appearance would be great. Having a Stanley Cup final for the first time since '67 would be awesome. And of course, a Stanley Cup would be great. But nobody's planning it. And so that's my favorite comment is plan the parade. Who's planning a parade? Yesterday I saw, Boston, you don't win the cup in November. Nobody said they did. It's a good first quarter, and teams that get off to good first quarters generally end up in the playoffs. They usually end up as top seeds as well. And so you have a better chance. Doesn't mean you're winning anything. In fact, if you win the President's Trophy, you may win the Stanley Cup, but you're not winning it that year. You'll win it later. So anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And this is just fun. It's just one of those fun videos. I just wanted to discuss it because I do see these comments and I wanted to see what you guys think. Because again, when I do re-rank the reverse retro jerseys, I expect a lot of, are you crazy? We told you that jersey was terrible. And then you get it and you still like it. Why are you like this? I'm unsubscribing because stupid hockey guy, he thinks this is a nice jersey. Can you believe this guy? Yeah, weird, right? But anyways, thank you guys so much for all your support. It means a lot. Channel's almost to 260,000 subscribers, so each and every like and subscribe is appreciated. And hey, I'm also checking out some World Cup action today, and I'll be talking about that on the Entertainment Guy once we know all the round of 16 and all that. So yeah, it's not just a hockey with me, but this is the hockey channel, so no discussing the World Cup too much on this channel. But anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. And here's the one. Which quote do you see most often online that you think is kind of a head scratcher, or you think people say way too early? Something that, people say and you're like, okay, the game just started. Why are you complaining already? So maybe something you've heard in a crowd at a game. Because there's things I've heard at a crowd at a game where like, really? You gave up already? I've had that reaction in Vancouver where fans are like, oh, this team sucks. There's no score yet. Can you wait? They'll suck later. Just stop spoiling it for me. Anyways, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.